An 84-year-old woman. Her front porch covered in her own blood. Her pink cane still leaning inside her front door. Her heart medication sitting untouched on the counter. Her phone, her wallet, her purse, all left behind. And a masked, armed figure captured on camera at her front door at 1:47 in the morning, going directly to the lens and interfering with it before doing whatever he came to do. That was 44 days ago. There has been no arrest. There is no named suspect. And somewhere out there, Nancy Guthrie is still waiting to come home. Welcome back to Cold Case History. I am going to walk you through every detail of this case. The footage, the forensics, the suspect behavior, the DNA, and the digital evidence trail. If you are new here, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. We cover every update on cases like this one the moment they break. And trust me, this one is not finished breaking yet. Let's begin at the beginning. Before we go anywhere, I need to say something clearly, and I need you to hold it the entire time you are watching this video. Nothing presented here is a verdict. No one has been charged. No one has been convicted. What you are about to hear is a sequence of verified, sourced, documented facts drawn from official law enforcement timelines, confirmed court records, published reporting by named journalists at major national outlets, and the public on-camera statements of credentialed federal law enforcement professionals who attached their names and their careers to everything they said. This is not Reddit. This is not a TikTok theory. These are professionals who spent careers inside the FBI, speaking on national television about what they see when they look at this case. My job tonight is to stop letting those statements exist in isolation across 6 weeks of daily news cycles and line them up one after another so that you can see what shape they make when they are standing in the same room together. 9 pieces. Named sources. Verified facts. Let's go. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old and living in the Catalina foothills neighborhood of Tucson, Arizona, when she vanished in the early morning hours of February 1, 2026. She was the mother of NBC Today Show anchor Savannah Guthrie, a woman of deep faith who never missed her church livestream on Sunday mornings, a woman her community described as humble and full of life and proud of everything she had built. When she did not appear for that Sunday morning service, her church reached out to her family. By around 11 in the morning, family members had gone to her home, walked through every room, searched the surrounding property, and found no trace of her. They called 911 just before noon. What investigators found when they arrived painted a picture that removed any possibility of a voluntary disappearance immediately. Her phone was inside. Her wallet was inside. Her purse was inside. Her pink cane, the one she used to move around her home, was still leaning against the wall. The heart medication she depended on to stay alive was sitting on the counter untouched, and her blood was on the front porch. The Pima County Sheriff's Department called it what the evidence demanded they call it: an abduction. The FBI classified the case as a kidnapping, moved in alongside local law enforcement, and one of the most intensive missing persons investigations in recent American history began. As of today, the reward pool has grown to over $1.2 million. More than 40,000 tips have flooded in, and Nancy Guthrie has not been found. The 9 pieces begin now. The first piece is the simplest and the most foundational, and it is not speculation. It is the official timeline issued by the Pima County Sheriff's Department themselves. On the evening of January 31st, Nancy had dinner at the home of her daughter Annie and Annie's husband, Tommaso. The sheriff's own confirmed record shows she arrived at their residence at 5:32 in the evening. The night was ordinary. They ate together, they played games together, and when the evening ended, it was Tommaso who drove her home. He dropped her at her house at approximately 9:48 at night, and he did not simply slow down and let her out. He waited. He sat in that driveway, and he watched until she had made it safely inside, until the garage door had risen and then descended behind her. The garage closed at 9:50. 2 minutes. And then he drove away. And sometime between that moment and 2:28 in the morning, when her pacemaker app disconnected from her phone and went silent, someone came for Nancy Guthrie. Tommaso was the last confirmed human being to see her alive. He knew she was alone. He knew she was inside. He knew the night had begun. In every missing persons case in the history of law enforcement, the last person known to have been in the victim's company before they vanished is the first person investigators are required to examine. Not because proximity equals guilt. It never automatically does. But because proximity equals access, and access is always the starting point. 1 piece. Keep counting. The second piece arrives on February 16th, day 16 of the investigation, when the Pima County Sheriff's Department issued a formal written statement clearing the Guthrie family entirely. All siblings and all spouses. The family had been cooperative and gracious, the statement said. To suggest otherwise was not only wrong, it was cruel. They were victims, the statement declared. Plain and simple. That clearance was issued on day 16. On day 27, CBS 5 Arizona reporter Brianna Whitney confirmed in a published report that the sheriff's department was still holding Annie and Tommaso's car. The comment the department provided in response to her inquiry was a single carefully constructed sentence. All we can say right now is that the vehicle is still part of the investigation. By March 11th, day 40, Parade confirmed the car had not been returned. It was sitting at a mechanic shop, and the description the department itself used for what had been done to it was not cursory, not preliminary, not routine. They called it an exhaustive search. Think about what that phrase means in physical terms. Exhaustive means panels removed from interior walls, upholstery stripped from seats and flooring, door panels disassembled, the dashboard opened, the engine bay and undercarriage inspected, every accessible space within the body of that vehicle opened, documented, examined, and then a mechanic required to reconstruct the entire thing before it could even be returned to the people it belongs to. That is not what you do to the vehicle of a cleared victim's family member. That is what you do when you believe a vehicle has something significant to tell you. One statement from that department said victims, plain and simple. Another statement from that same department, 25 days later, said the vehicle is still part of the investigation. Both statements cannot be fully true at the same time, and the only person positioned to explain how they coexist has spent 44 days saying nothing. Two pieces, both technically explainable on their own. Keep going. Piece 3. In 44 days, Tommaso Cioni has not made a single public statement. Not a press conference. Not a written comment released through an attorney. Not a social media post. Not a brief word to a journalist on a doorstep. Not one sentence directed at the public, at investigators, at the cameras, at anyone. About a woman he personally drove home, personally watched into her house, personally sat in the driveway waiting on while the garage door came down. In 44 days of a nationally covered kidnapping investigation where his mother-in-law's blood was found on her own porch and her daughter has been standing in front of cameras begging the world for help, Tommaso Cioni has said nothing publicly. What has been documented and confirmed by multiple outlets is a single moment from day 4. On February 4th, when photographers were present outside, Tommaso deliberately pulled a jacket up over his face to block any image of him from being captured. Not a glance away, not an instinctive hand gesture, a deliberate, full coverage of his face. Day 4. 44 days later, the public statement count remains identical to what it was on day 1. 0. Now, because this channel stands on fairness, the counterarguments exist, and they matter. There are people who grieve in complete silence. There are people for whom a camera is an impossibility during trauma. There are people whose attorneys have advised them not to speak publicly during an active investigation, and that advice, when given for legitimate legal reasons, is entirely appropriate. Those counterarguments are real. But here is what is also real. Savannah Guthrie, Tommaso's sister-in-law, has done the opposite of everything described above. She has stood in front of cameras repeatedly. She has posted on Instagram. She has returned to her Today Show colleagues. She has made public appeals, held vigils, stood at her mother's mailbox surrounded by flowers, and done every single thing a desperate family member can do to keep the public focused on bringing someone home. The contrast between Savannah's total public presence and Tommaso's total public absence across 44 days in a kidnapping case is not a subtle gap. It is a documented, verifiable, observable gulf. 3 pieces. Stay with me. Piece 4. On February 4th, the same day Tommaso was photographed covering his face, News Nation anchor Ashley Banfield went on her podcast and said something that reframed the entire national conversation. Banfield is not a blogger with a theory. She has spent decades building a professional reputation that does not survive getting this kind of thing wrong. She told her audience that she had a source, and she described that source in deliberate, specific terms. Highly credentialed, impeccable professional standing, with direct, first-hand knowledge of the investigation's internal direction. Not adjacent to it, not familiar with it from news coverage, inside it, and that source told her that Tommaso Cioni was being viewed as a potential prime suspect. Banfield was careful in how she framed it. She acknowledged the language was analytical rather than a formal designation, but she reported it. She put her name on it, and when the pressure came to walk it back, she did not move. The sheriff's response arrived within days, and it was aggressive. He called her coverage reckless from his press conference podium, the space where he controls follow-up questions and manages the information pipeline. He invoked his authority. He attacked the messenger. He did not point to a single specific piece of evidence that contradicted what her source had told her. He expected the story to fold under the weight of his dismissal. It did not. When legal analyst Dan Abrams pressed Banfield directly, asking her to either retract or defend her reporting, she was unequivocal. Her sources were solid. The information came from people with direct first-hand knowledge of where the investigation was pointing. And then she said the line that has followed this case ever since. When they take shots at you, she said, you are standing on the target. That is a professional's assessment of what it means when a law enforcement official attacks the reporter instead of the report. There are only two reasons an official attacks coverage rather than correcting it with evidence. Either the reporter got something factually wrong and the official can prove it, or the reporter got close to something the official does not want examined closely. The sheriff never produced the factual correction. He produced the attack. And 12 days after Banfield's report, he issued that family clearance, a written statement that spent as much space lecturing the press on compassion as it spent communicating an investigative conclusion. Banfield has never retracted a single word. For pieces, you already feel the direction, and we are only halfway there. Piece 5. The midpoint. The piece that changes everything. Tommaso Cioni played bass in a Tucson-based band called Early Black. The group formed in April 2007 when Tommaso met a guitarist named Walter Praise Goncalves Jr. through a Craigslist advertisement. The third member who completed the lineup, the drummer, was a man named Dominic Aaron Lee Evans. The three of them built a band from the ground up, booked a recording studio, recorded their debut album at Loveland Studios in Tucson in late 2009 and early 2010, and released it in 2010 to positive local coverage in the Tucson Weekly. They played shows across Tucson, Phoenix, and Flagstaff. These are documented, published, publicly verifiable facts drawn from the band's own Reverb Nation biography. Their debut album was called Life, Love, Love, Murder. Nobody on this channel named that album. Dominic Evans and Tommaso Cioni did. In 2010, 16 years before Nancy Guthrie disappeared, Dominic Evans and Tommaso Cioni were not strangers who shared a single open mic night. They built something together from a classified ad and a recording studio through years of rehearsals, shows, and a jointly titled, jointly released debut record. That is a close, sustained, multi-year relationship. Evans is 48 years old. He lives in the Tucson area, the same geographic footprint as the crime. According to Pima County court records that have been publicly reported and confirmed by multiple major outlets including the New York Times, Dominic Aaron Lee Evans has felony charges on his record for burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. These are not social media rumors. These are court records from the jurisdiction where this crime occurred, reported by the newspaper of record in the United States. Investigators did not ignore Evans once national attention landed on Tommaso. According to confirmed reporting by Parade and the New York Times, Evans spoke with investigators approximately 1 week into the case. The conversation lasted around 30 minutes. They asked about the band. They asked about his relationship with Tommaso Cioni. And they asked where he was on the night of January 31st going into the early hours of February 1st, the exact window when Nancy Guthrie was taken. Evans said he had met Nancy once, back in 2011, when he brought one of his children to her home for an Easter egg hunt. He said he had not heard from investigators since that 30-minute conversation ended. His wife told the Times the media attention had their family afraid to turn a light on at night. What the verified public record contains, assembled together, is this. A man with documented felony convictions for burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. A close multi-year creative partner and friend of the man who was the last person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. Operating in the same Tucson area where the abduction occurred. Interviewed by investigators about his whereabouts on the night she was taken. Connected to the person whose car is still being reassembled at a mechanic shop weeks after that person's family clearance. And co-creator of a debut album they named together and released together called Life, Love, Love, Murder. Former FBI criminal profiler and retired Special Agent Jim Clemente said publicly on March 8, 2026 that every single person who had even a tangential relationship to Nancy should be looked at and fully vetted. Dominic Evans did not have a tangential relationship to the man who drove Nancy home that night. He had a years-long, documented, album-producing relationship with him. 5 pieces. The midpoint. Is the pattern visible yet? If you're still here, subscribe, because cases like this only work when people stay. And tell us where you're watching from. I love seeing my global family represent. Drop your country or city in the comments. Piece 6. On February 27th, the same day CBS 5's Brianna Whitney confirmed the car was still being held, former FBI criminal profiler and Special Agent Jim Fitzgerald appeared on the Megyn Kelly Show. That timing is not incidental. He was reacting to live, current, confirmed information about that vehicle when he made the statements he made. Fitzgerald built his career on behavioral analysis, on reading what people do and what they don't do in situations where both choices carry weight. He brought that career into that conversation, and he did not soften its conclusions. He said there were interesting red flags about the family in this case. Those words, from a former FBI criminal profiler, are not idle commentary. They are the precise language of someone who has spent a career learning to distinguish between behavior that is understandable and behavior that demands explanation. And then he said the sentence that has been repeated across dozens of outlets since that broadcast. If I was completely innocent, he said, I would hire a lawyer by now and say I want my car back. That sentence is worth sitting with. He was not performing for television. He was applying a behavioral framework built from real federal cases to a specific, documented, real situation. A family that has been formally cleared. A car that has not been returned. And a cleared family that has not publicly demanded it back. He was saying that from the perspective of a genuinely innocent person, the rational response to your car being held in an exhaustive forensic examination weeks after your clearance is to get a lawyer and get loud. The absence of that response registered to him as a data point. As a flag, he went further. He speculated aloud about whether Savannah Guthrie herself might be carrying a private suspicion she is not yet ready to look directly at or say out loud. He phrased it carefully, the way a profiler phrases things when the behavioral read is strong but the evidence is still moving. He said maybe she doesn't want to believe some things. A retired FBI profiler does not reach for that formulation unless something specific in the picture of the case directed him there. He named no one formally. He drew no legal conclusions. But he put his name and his career on camera, and he said red flags. And he described what an innocent person would do and noted that it was not being done. 6 pieces. A former FBI criminal profiler. On the record. Piece 7. On that same February 27th broadcast, former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell spoke about that car and said something more precise than anything else that has been said publicly about it. O'Connell's background is not analysis from a distance. She spent her career inside federal investigations, processing crime scenes, executing search warrants, managing evidence chains. When she describes what it means when law enforcement holds onto a vehicle, she is not offering an opinion. She is describing professional practice she participated in hundreds of times. And she was direct. She said she has processed hundreds and hundreds of cars in her federal career. She said the only ones they keep are the ones that are involved in some way, shape, or form, or that carry some form of evidentiary value. They do not hold on to a car from a cleared victim's family member. That was the first thing she said. The second thing was the one that stopped the room. Addressing the specific question of why that car was still in custody after the clearance, weeks after the formal statement that described the family as victims, plain and simple, she said you only hold on to it if you are going to need it for trial. For trial. Not for a loose end in the current search. Not for a procedural formality. For trial. That is the word a federal agent with hundreds of vehicle processing cases in her professional history reached for when trying to explain why a cleared family's car was still being exhaustively examined by the people who cleared them. A trial requires a prosecution. A prosecution requires a suspect. A suspect requires sufficient evidence for charges to be filed. And the car, the disassembled, panel removed, mechanic reassembled car, was still in their custody. That is not a coincidence. That is a former federal agent reading the behavior of the people she used to work alongside and telling you in plain professional English what it means when they do not give a cleared family's car back. 7 pieces. The word trial. On camera. From a federal agent. Piece 8. Former FBI criminal profiler Jim Clemente appeared publicly on March 8, 2026, and said that every single person who had even a tangential relationship to Nancy should be looked at and fully vetted. To understand the full weight of that statement, you have to hold it against what the evidence had already established about the nature of this crime before he said those words. Because this was not random. This was not an opportunistic intruder who spotted an unlocked door. This was a planned, targeted, operationally sophisticated abduction of one specific woman in one specific house executed by someone who possessed a comprehensive and intimate knowledge of how that household functioned. Walk through the full inventory of what that perpetrator knew. They knew which house was hers. They knew the property's layout well enough to move through it in darkness with confidence. They knew the exact location of the doorbell camera, and they went directly to it first, before doing anything else, and they knew how to interfere with it. They knew about a vulnerability in the Wi-Fi coverage around the property. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood afterwards, specifically asking residents about internet disruptions on the night of February 1st, and multiple neighbors confirmed connectivity problems that same night. The sheriff himself has since confirmed publicly that investigators are actively looking into whether an internet or electrical disruption was deliberately created to establish a digital blind spot around that block. They knew Nancy removed her hearing aids at night. which meant she would not hear a door open, would not hear footsteps in a hallway, would not hear an approach. They knew her pacemaker was Bluetooth connected to her phone, meaning they understood the specific medical monitoring technology she depended on and precisely what disconnecting it from that phone at a specific moment would mean. They knew her daily medication schedule and what missing it would cost her. They knew she had no functioning alarm system. They knew her dog was dead, eliminating the one early warning system most homeowners take for granted. They knew she would be alone that night after she was dropped off. And they had been watching long before February 1st. A neighbor had seen a suspicious man in the Catalina Foothills neighborhood 3 weeks before Nancy disappeared. Investigators subsequently went back and requested doorbell camera footage specifically from January 11th, a date that tells you they believe something observable happened on that day during the weeks of pre-abduction surveillance that preceded the crime. This level of operational knowledge, this comprehensive, intimate, granular understanding of one specific elderly woman's specific home, her routines, her medical vulnerabilities, her security gaps, her schedule, her aloneness, does not come from driving past a house. It does not come from watching from across the street. It comes from someone who had direct personal knowledge of how that life operated, or from someone who had direct personal access feeding that knowledge to whoever was going to use it. Clementi said every single person with even a tangential relationship to Nancy should be looked at and fully vetted. When you hold that sentence against the complete inventory of what the perpetrator knew, the word tangential barely touches it. The person who drove her home that night knew when she would be alone. He knew the house. He knew the routine. He watched the garage door close. 8 pieces. 8 verified data points from named sources. One more. Piece 9. Annie Guthrie, Nancy's daughter, Savannah's older sister, Tommaso's wife. On day 41 of the investigation, Annie was photographed at Nancy's home in the Catalina Foothills. She was there with her brother Cameron, not with Tommaso. Annie and Cameron together at their missing mother's home, while the case sat without an arrest and without a named suspect. The photographs that circulated through news outlets and social media on March 11th showed Annie in a dark hoodie pulled up over her head, dark sunglasses covering her eyes, her face not visible, her features actively concealed from any camera that might capture her outside the home of her missing mother. The public reaction to those images was immediate, documented, and significant. 44 days of watching Savannah stand in front of cameras with her face open, her grief raw, her voice cracking while she asked the world to help bring her mother home, produced an instant and unmistakable comparison the moment people saw Annie's photographs. The contrast was not subtle, and the internet did not treat it as subtle. Annie has not given a single public interview in 44 days. She has made no public statement. She has not appeared on camera to plead for information the way her sister has done consistently and repeatedly. And when she was finally photographed publicly, outside her missing mother's house, she was covered, head down, face hidden. Former FBI criminal profiler Jim Fitzgerald had already gone on national television and raised aloud the possibility that Savannah Guthrie might be carrying a private suspicion about her own family that she is not yet ready to speak. He said maybe she doesn't want to believe some things. And on day 41, while the car was still in pieces at a mechanic shop and the arrest had still not come, Annie Guthrie was at Nancy's house, without her husband, with her face hidden behind dark glasses and a pulled-up hood. That is piece 9. 9 pieces laid out in sequence, one after another, not scattered across 6 weeks of competing news cycles and daily distractions, but standing together in the same space so you can see what shape they make. The last confirmed person to see Nancy alive drove her home and watched the garage close. The car he and his wife share has sat in a mechanic shop being reassembled for over 40 days after a formal family clearance, described by the department as the result of an exhaustive search. He has made 0 public statements in 44 days and covered his face with a jacket on day 4. Ashley Banfield's source, described as highly credentialed with direct internal knowledge of the investigation, named him a potential prime suspect on day 4, and she has never walked a single word back. His bandmate and close multi-year creative partner Dominic Evans has documented felony convictions for burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement, was questioned by investigators about his whereabouts the night Nancy was taken, and co-created a debut album with Tommaso that they named Life, Love, Murder. Former FBI profiler Jim Fitzgerald said interesting red flags on camera and stated that a genuinely innocent person would be loudly demanding that car back through legal representation. Former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell, who has processed hundreds of vehicles in her federal career, said they only hold on to cars that carry evidentiary value. And then she said the word trial. The level of inside knowledge required to execute this abduction with this operational precision points directly to someone with intimate personal access to Nancy Guthrie's life. And Annie Guthrie has spent 44 days covering her face. 9 pieces. Every single one sourced. Every single one verified. Every expert identified by name, by credential, and by the platform on which they chose to speak. Now I am going to give you the word. On March 10, 2026, retired FBI agent Jennifer Coffindaffer, who has been among the most credible and most carefully sourced public analysts of this case since the very beginning, posted publicly on social media a question that has since been picked up and covered by Newsweek, TV Insider, The Mirror US, The Irish Star, and multiple other major outlets. She asked whether law enforcement's continued refusal of civilian search assistance might mean they already know where this ends. She asked whether they are close to an arrest. She said, half glass full, hoping law enforcement is getting closer. A retired FBI agent who has analyzed every major development of this case through the trained lens of someone who spent her career building federal cases looked at the full pattern of investigative behavior in week 6 and raised the possibility that an arrest is imminent. No arrest has been made as of this recording. No one has been charged. The Guthrie family was formally cleared on February 16, 2026. Nothing in this video is a verdict. Nothing in this video is a conviction. These are the documented words of named federal law enforcement professionals applied to verified facts from confirmed sources. But here is what else is documented and confirmed and verified and true. Mixed DNA was recovered from Nancy Guthrie's property. Sheriff Nanos has said publicly he believes that DNA is going to get them to somebody. A glove containing DNA evidence was recovered roughly 2 miles from her home. The sheriff has confirmed on the Today Show that he believes the abduction was targeted, that investigators believe they know why it was done, and he has refused to rule out the possibility that this perpetrator could strike again. Google has been working to extract additional footage from cameras in and around the property. The FBI has been analyzing digital evidence, physical evidence, and forensic laboratory results simultaneously. Law enforcement has returned to Annie Guthrie's property multiple times, 5 confirmed visits according to reporting, each one driven by new actionable information. Former FBI agent Maureen O'Connell has said on camera that she has never, in her entire federal career, heard of anyone going back to a location 4 or 5 times unless new information kept pointing them there. And she said it keeps pointing back in the same direction. Whatever those 9 pieces point to, wherever the DNA leads, whatever the car is still being held to prove in a courtroom, wherever this investigation is heading in the days ahead, only one thing has ever truly been at the center of it. An 84-year-old woman left her home without her cane, without her phone, without her heart medication, without a single voluntary choice to go. She did not leave. She was taken, and she has been waiting 44 days for someone to bring her home. If you have any information at all about the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, call the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI. The Pima County Sheriff's Department tip line is 520-351-4900. The Guthrie family reward is $1 million. The FBI is offering $100,000. 88 Crime is offering $12,500. Over $1.2 million is on the table for the person who knows something and decides today is the day they say it. Bring her home. Now, if this video gave you something, if it organized something you had been trying to see clearly for 6 weeks, share it. Right now, send it to one person who has been following this case. Drop a comment telling me which piece hit you the hardest and where in the world you are watching from. Subscribe if you are not already here, because this case is not over, and when it breaks, you need to be in the room. Click the bell. Stay close. Nancy Guthrie is still out there. We are not done.